Now we'll complete posing our major extremes for our gallop cycle. So we just have one more major pose remaining for our limbs, that is. Then we're going to go back and add a little bit of up and down for the center of mass control and also get these front muscles moving forward so we'll get a more realistic result. Okay, and just to note, as we move the muscles forward, we will need to shift our keys for our front limbs so that they will have the correct pose. So let's go to frame 10 and add our last pose. What we can do here is go ahead and start with our right thoracic limb. With that selected, what we can do is zero out the fetlock here, because notice as we see in the image, it's kind of rolling up. So we can zero that out. Also zero out our X. Okay, we'll zero out our Y, since it's kind of still planted here. And instead, what we'll do is bring up the hoof control, as it looks as if it's on somewhat of a roll that's coming up. Okay, then we'll go ahead and move the limb back. Okay, just to about that point, and then we could scrub back and forth to see how it looks. And of course, we're going to need to make some modifications on the frame before with our hoof. So let's go ahead and roll that down. We'll bring it back to a value of 0 to fix that for our front hoof. Then we'll go back and notice, alright, our pose is looking pretty nice here. So going back to frame 10, let's see, now we could start having our left thoracic limb coming down to about a planted position. So let's go ahead and have that. We'll bring it about here where it's straightened out, and also adjust our fetlock, rolling it up slightly for the follow through there. Great. Now once we have this, bringing our attention now to the pelvic limb, so what's going to happen here is this left is going to switch with the position of the right. Okay, so the left is going to come back the most here. So we're going to want to bring that up and out, really extending it. Remember, exaggerating it. Also keeping in mind the 90-degree angle principle, okay, of the legs, but exaggerating it a little bit more so we could give a little bit more entertainment to our animation. Make it look nicer. Then we could bring down the right limb as it's starting to come down, and also roll up the fetlock some. Okay, so as we scrub through, notice we get a switch. Okay, and the switch, it does almost look a little bit awkward. Okay, it looks like one limb is just, it almost doesn't look like a switch at all because of positioning one limb where the other one was. So we can just add a slight adjustment here where we take our left limb and let's just bring that down. Okay, and we'll also roll back the fetlock there a little bit too for the follow through there. Okay, so that's looking like a better switch from doing that little fix. Excellent. So with these things done, that finishes off the major poses for our gallop. So let's go ahead and check out how our animation is looking right now. Well, one thing we can do is just go ahead and play back from our viewport, but depending on what's in our scene, we may get somewhat of a lag as we play back, or we may not get the real-time result of our animation. So what we can do is set up our play blast option so we can. But let's go ahead and do that. What we'll do is first hide our curves so we don't get any distractions, just so we can focus on our animation. And once we have done that, we'll also make sure we knock off the last frame. And the reason why is when we want to see our seamless cycle, we don't want our first and last frames repeating, because then we'll get somewhat of a pause. So we'll just knock off that last frame. And once our character is in shot, or our horse is in shot, okay, not getting clipped off at all, we can now go to Window and Play Blast so we can see a real-time representation of our animation. Let's even reset our settings back to default and work our way down. So we want to go based off of the time slider. We'll leave that checked. That's fine. Let's check off Show Ornaments. That hides certain things like if we had a camera ornament at the corner or even our axis point. Okay, we can hide those things. And we'll use F-Check. F-Check is great because we can also scrub frame by frame in it and draw in the F-Check window, as we'll see a little bit later on. So we'll check that on and also scale up our size that the window is going to be so we can see a nice view of it. And you could also save your play blast if you like, but I'm not going to go ahead and do that. So now we're ready to hit play blast, and I'm going to pause the video throughout the play blast, but please pay attention to it as it is rendering out the play blast so you can see how the animation is looking, what areas you like, what areas you don't that need tweaking. So this is a great time to view the animation as it is rendering for a play blast. So again, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Here it is. Alright, great. So notice how our animation is looking really nice already as far as our gallop is concerned for the side view. Okay, we do need to work on certain areas like the front muscles. We need to get those moving because it doesn't look natural at all. It just looks kind of robotic without them moving. We want to add that organic feel. And we also need to clean up some of our F-curves so we can get our motion a little bit more fluid, as well as fix up our timing and spacing and such. And we even need to add some up and down. So let's say we go ahead and work on the up and down right now, and then we'll move to what we'd see in more of the front muscles. Okay, and later on we'll spend the time cleaning up our F-curves so we can get some nice looking fluidity in our movement. But before we actually close out the F-check, let me just show you a few things that you can do with the F-check that makes it really handy. If you want to stop the animation, making sure you have the window selected, you can hit the space bar to pause it. Okay, and then also, if you use the right and left directional buttons, the right will have you scrub forward frame by frame, and the left backward frame by frame. So that could be really helpful. Okay, and also, as I mentioned before, you can draw in the F-check window. So you could use the right mouse button, clicking and dragging, and you can draw in the window. Okay, and whatever frame you draw on, that's the frame that it's going to record the drawing on. So if we hit spacebar to play it again, notice it's going to show up on the 9th frame that I drew on. Now, if you want to clean up that drawing, you could also go back to it. So I'll just go back to frame 9 and go to File and Revert to clean it up. So those are a few things to keep in mind about F-check. But let's go ahead and close out our F-check window now. We could bring back our control curves. And let's start working on adding the basic up and down movements, and then we'll work on cleaning up, again, our F-curves afterwards. So here's where the horse is really up in the air at about frame 2 as it's coming up. So we could just go there and bring up the center of gravity here. So here's what we get, and it lowers and then comes right back up. So here's how it looks if we were to play back in our viewport. Great, so that's looking pretty good already. So we'll just leave it as is right now and work on our front muscles. So starting with our left shoulder muscle, we want to go look at areas where our forearm here, where the horse's forearm is furthest the most, and that will tell us, okay, that's where we need to have the front muscle as far forward as it needs to be. So that area is going to be at about frame 8. So go ahead and just translate the control up a little bit here, as well as go into our rotation mode and just rotate it out in the X slightly. And notice we're losing the extension of our legs, so we'll need to adjust that a little bit later. Okay, but notice we have the muscle coming up now. And we also need to look for the point where it's back the most. That's going to be about frame 2. So now we can translate the muscle down just slightly and also roll it back. And again, we're not going to match up our left with our right. They're going to be slightly different. But here's what we have now for the left. All right, that's looking pretty good. So from there, we can go to our right. Let's go back to our perspective view. And notice this really cool camera tool. What we can do with it in Maya is just go ahead and select this icon here, right directly opposite from our X, our positive X here. We just select that, and that will go to what we'd see on the right. Now once we have gotten there, what we can do from here is now work on animating the right. So let's deselect the left, select the right, and look for the area where the forearm is furthest the most. That's going to be about frame 5. So knowing that, we'll go ahead and rotate it up just slightly and also translate it up. Great. And then we'll look for the area where it's back the most. And that's going to be about frame 12. So now we'll just translate it down and also rotate it back slightly. Great. Maybe even a little bit more. Excellent. All right, so this is looking pretty good. We didn't want to move up the muscles too much. We wanted still have it so that there would be a fold in this area if this were a skin character, because that's what would happen. Awesome. So now that we have these things, we could go back to our perspective. Make sure we have one of our controls selected. So we could select the center box, and that will zoom on right into where our control was. Okay. Excellent. And as we hide our curves and go ahead and play back our animation, we can see how it's looking right now. And of course, we do have areas of our limbs where they're still bent and they're going to need to come forward. So what we'll do is stop the lesson here. In the next lesson, we'll work on bringing those forward, as well as fixing the timing and spacing of our animation so it's correct.